So it's been a hot minute. I apologize for lack of updates, except for that one tweet and the post on Patreon. But other than that, there really hasn't been much to say. Definitely not a whole video worthy. Since late November, I've been fine. But for a few months, I was simultaneously occupied by pretty busy daily life operations. And I also didn't have my workstation set up to do pretty much almost literally anything. All I had was a bed. Also, I'm ashamed to say it, but I really wasn't in a creative mood. And it is something I'm struggling with right now as well. Either game dev or music wise. Well, maybe no longer game dev wise, but music wise, yeah, definitely. In the near past as well as right now. I was, however, doodling up kind of like a game design document and writing music on my old, like, first generation iPad Air, that is, sorry, which really helped me in not being completely directionless by the time I got a workstation. I do have some pretty cool news, some shameful news, and also some premature announcements to make. It's something to share. It can't really do any harm anyway in its prematureness. So the first piece of news that I'd like to share with you is me finally remaking my websites. I did it during the time when all I had was a bed and a laptop, and it didn't eat into my ability to work on anything else. I have wanted to see my websites redone and rehosted since long time ago. Well, just as I was about to start working really on it, slightly over half a year ago, certain external factors took away my ability to, well, actually see it through all the way to the end, because I, lost the ability to do things like paying for domains. My personal portfolio website is no longer powered by and hosted on WordPress now. So I made a new website from scratch. It now has a clean URL, and of course, it doesn't have any WordPress ads or any ads in general. If you only know me as a musician or only as a streamer slash podcaster, bitchcaster, well, or you only know me from the language education side of things somehow, please consider checking out the new website. It's not a terribly long read, and it will give you a detailed picture on who I am and what I do. It's johnhalpert.com. Link is on the screen and in the description, I assume. The next website I redid is the obscure language learning one called NBSI, which stands for No BS Immersion. It is something I made a long time ago, initially on WordPress. Well, initially in the PDF form. It is completely useless to you unless you are either studying a language or thinking about studying a language. It's mostly it's mostly centered around the idea of learning Japanese, I suppose, but it's mostly done this way because that's something I have a lot of experience with, first of all, but also because it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of easier to just be talking about one language instead of just languages in general. But it is really applicable to pretty much any language. That's the magic of immersion, really. The only possible deviation from how I describe language acquisition with languages other than the Japanese would just be that most other languages are actually quite easier to learn than how I describe acquiring Japanese. So there is a chapter, or maybe like a few paragraphs in one of the chapters, basically talking about, if the language you're trying to acquire is not Japanese and it's not Chinese, pretty much these are the steps that you can just completely skip, or that pretty much just don't apply to you. Well, as you might already kind of guessed, the website serves as both a response to and a critique of the modern juvenile polyglot culture on YouTube. It didn't originate on YouTube, but it's now that mostly it's here. Because I mentioned the word immersion, so if you know anything about language learning, immersion, you immediately kind of you can guess the kind of scene that this guide might be part of. It is not. It is actually a critique of that scene. But in addition to being a critique, it is also a step-by-step guide to acquiring languages for real. Mostly for people who value their time and brain cells, either one or both of which you will inevitably have to say goodbye to if you make the mistake of listening to most language gurus on this website. NBSI is no longer on WordPress, of course. Remade it from scratch. Therefore, it has a proper domain name and no ads. And it has a completely new design with actually some functionality that I physically would not have been able to do on WordPress unless maybe, I don't know, paying money to it. It even has more content, actually, than before. The old content is now a little bit more up-to-date, and the new one is obviously up-to-date, and it is significantly more proofread. I'm ashamed to admit, it was far from perfect. It is still far, but it's getting somewhere, I suppose. I assume there are still mistakes and like typos. More like typos, really, than mistakes. I don't think there's a lot of mistakes there. But yeah, the time I took from from engaging with the website was definitely helpful in kind of having a fresher experience of rereading that material for the nth time. And I noticed a bunch of mistakes that were still there. But that's just the reality, really, of writing a book, I suppose, or writing anything. I had to be a little creative with the domain name, but I think it's fitting. It's nbsi2.com, like the digit 2. There's a reason for it. Just nbsi.com was taken, and I was advised not to go with nobsimmersion.com, apparently because it reads as knobs immersion, which I didn't even think would be a problem. But I'm like, okay. So, okay, I went with a different one. The link is on the screen and in the description, I assume. I should probably also mention, because it's pretty exciting to me, that now my Bandcamp page has a custom URL. It's just memorylake.com now. As always, link is on the screen in the description, I think. Okay, so maybe there is not. I don't know, but I assume there could be a bit of an elephant in the room. So let's talk about Poison. Not the social media, but the album I announced a while ago. Unfortunately, I overestimated how long it'll take me to go back to a working condition from the point when I made the announcement. And now I find myself working on several things at the same time, as always, which keeps pushing Poison back. It also took me almost 4 months, legitimately, from actually more than 4 months, more like 5, Jesus, if not even slightly over, since making that video, to get to a place where, first of all, I mentally can work on things, but also, to having an actual workplace or workspace, whatever you want to call it, workstation. And yeah, now, because I got so far behind on so many things, Poison is not the only thing I'm working on. So the good news is that I am working on it every day. Bad news is that I've come face to face with some serious software drama. All the workflow has been pretty damn slow, and unslowing it will require some significant cash, which I don't have. So instead of getting into debt, so that for the next 4 to 5 months, I can work on the album that is guaranteed to not pay for itself, I think a more reasonable thing would be to diversify at least a little bit. I cannot just prioritize Poison. I cannot afford that. I want to finish Poison. The next single is coming out soon. It might already be out even, because it took me so long to actually just sit down and record this video. It might already be out. When I initially thought about making this video, Poison, the second Poison single, would have been out in 2 to 3 weeks probably. Now it might be out tomorrow or even now. So the single is definitely coming out soon. It's a 2-track single, like a semi-maxi single, whatever, type of deal. But what about the album? I cannot finish the entire album the way I did this last single. I wrote and arranged everything using crappy placeholder synths, and then I installed proper synths in trial modes and set them up real quickly and recorded everything while the trial mode lasted. So I cannot do that again. So here's what's happening. The second single is coming out in a week, maybe less, maybe 2 weeks. It might already be out or in just a day or two on Bandcamp, though. Pretty much guaranteed. There's probably a link in the description even. So the single is coming out, after which I can either invest into finishing Poison and actually doing it, or I can keep working very part-time on another single using the synths that I have left, or maybe a couple of free ones. So these are the options. In the latter case, delivery time will be not good. On the album, definitely, because I'm not even going to be working on the album. I'm just not going to be in the mental... I'm not going to feel secure enough to just be working on the entire album, but I can definitely give a single a shot. But even that single, the delivery time on it's not going to be very good, since it won't be my main priority. And in the case of fully investing in Poison, therefore prioritizing it over everything else and delivering it not only in the best quality I can, but also in a reasonable time span, I am going to need your help. There will be a Kickstarter in a week or two after the second single. The outcome of which, the Kickstarter, not the single, will ultimately decide how things be done, which path I will take. Poison will be finished one way or the other. I just want to be fully transparent with you about what is going on with it. The last thing I'm working on is a video game, still and again. I started conceptualizing something I can actually finish by myself again, and that wouldn't take 5 years to finish again, in late November. And in, I think, early-ish March, I started the actual work on it. I'm very close to being done with the demo. It's not too small, not too big, and it's going to be an actual demo, not just a proof of concept. I mean, I suppose hopefully the finished product will be much more, I don't know, look better, feel better, all of those things. But it's not just a proof of concept, the point I'm trying to make. The previous project that you might know of, the MEFU one, I sort of had to cancel because, after all, I just wouldn't be able to finish it without a big contribution from a visual artist. And after that, I actually had another idea. I think right before I made my Patreon page, with a similar philosophy, something I can finish by myself and that wouldn't take forever, and that wouldn't feel or look compromised by not having an artist or a good animator. Something that is minimalistic and it looks like it is minimalistic on purpose. But eventually I realized that it would just take me too long to finish. The project was doable, yes, but it would take it was a tad too big. I would love to make it still one day, hopefully when I'm more financially secure. To give you an idea, we are essentially talking light immersive sim territory. So, yeah. A doable immersive sim, definitely. But I don't have 5 years to make it. There are just way too many things for that idea that require individual logic. Right now I need something with more prefab reuse potential, or something that a game with mechanics that you can just program once and they can carry the entire game basically on just using those mechanics. And with immersive sim, there is a lot of individual things that just every little element of the game might require. Not really. I mean, there's still a lot of prefab reuse potential for immersive sims, of course, but I gave it a good thinking, and I realized that I may not be the person to make a game like that by myself in a reasonable time. So I came up with a new idea, and I am going back to working really, really hard on it right after the second Poison single is out. It won't be long until the demo. As I already said, it's actually kind of close to being done. And after that, there will probably be a Kickstarter. If that fails, you may see an early access, maybe a month or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road. Yeah, it's not going to be a month, but yeah, early access could be a possibility. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. I played a few games I probably would have made videos about, actually. Despite me saying, screw the gaming content in my last video. Well, not technically last video, but, the last gaming video. It's, it's been a while, and I don't know. I suppose I could just talk about a few things. I know I sort of retired from gaming content, but the truth is that there was absolutely nothing interesting going on in the gaming sphere when I made that statement. There was maybe about one really, really good indie game coming out a year, and on certain years, not even that, to be honest with you. But things have changed. For those of us who've been following video games for more than 20 years, the AAA industry became largely irrelevant. It became just a machine for manufacturing products for normies. There's barely anything to look forward to. There's barely anything artistic or original about video games the AAA the AAA industry is capable of producing. There's barely any enjoyment in it, really. The games became very formulaic. The games became very checklist oriented, somewhat pretty-ish, interactive movies. And I am not entirely sure if the current state of the largest part of the gaming industry right now, if it actually has anything in it for people who are into video games, really. It's kind of like saying, well, if you're into movies, you must love Hollywood. If you're into professional wrestling, the main thing you follow must be WWE, right? Because it's the biggest thing, it's the most expensive thing, therefore it's the best thing. And, well, you probably know that that's not the case. WWE probably has the worst pro wrestling available anywhere. And Hollywood probably makes the most pointless and boring movies to watch. And the AAA industry for video games kind of became, the same thing ever since it came to Hollywood, or Hollywood came to it. The conversion to pointlessness has, finally reached its completion around 2019 or 2020. Arguably even earlier, but to me, 2020 was the year when, the thing just finally died, I think, officially. And now I think we have a completely new scene that doesn't just exist on the periphery of the old AAA industry. It exists to replace it. And that's kind of exciting. And that almost got me back into, thinking about video games and wanting to discuss a few things. So a bunch of the games that I played since making my last video, I actually did on my phone, which, by the way, I recently, quote unquote, modified into a Switch killing handheld, which was surprisingly easy to do. And I'm not sure why everyone kind of just ignores the fact that you can have the best handheld ever, pretty much, for as little as $10 if you already have a controller. But, well, I might talk about it in a different video. But yeah, if you ever wanted a handheld, you already have one. we're talking about games, I should probably address my previous gaming-related video in which I struggle to remember any good new games released in 2020. I was being a complete idiot, of course, something I can admit about myself, unlike most others. The game of the year 2020 is, of course, Hades, the first Supergiant game I really, really, really liked. Supergiant had their asses kissed to blisters with every single game they've made, and I was never into them all that much. Bastion was cute, but it was like a game for non-gamers, baby's first game. Transistor was a complete miss for me, and Pyre was cool, but I couldn't give two ducks about the furry visual novel part of it. Hades, however, is not only 100% my jam, except that I played with the VO turned off. It is actually one of the very few roguelikes that, in my opinion, do it right. It has awesome music, awesome graphics, and borderline character action gameplay. Yeah, telegraphs can be a bit difficult to get used to because of not very predictable animations. But as you get more powerful and more offensive, it pretty much stops being a problem. Which leads me to the most awesomest part of Hades, which is progression. Every run is satisfying. That's something I cannot say about most roguelikes. Everything you do contributes to either making yourself stronger or just generally unlocking cool new stuff. You're not just getting better at the game as you play it, you can actually feel the effects of progression on how the game plays. The game starts playing differently. Almost no other roguelike offers that. Risk of Rain 1 and 2, Binding of Isaac also, even my beloved Slay the Spire are pretty much just exercises in doing the same thing over and over again until doing the same thing over and over again, waiting for RNG to throw you a broken build. And Hades has a fair bit of RNG builds as well, but it also has so much more permanent upgrades and improvements to both the character and the world. It just makes the game so much more meaningful. It gives you so much more control above the usual just keep doing the same thing and wait for RNG. Gives you more control over your experience. No run is really ever wasted. Dying is actually not frustrating. Most other roguelikes are primarily fit for streaming, in my opinion. Even Slay the Spire, despite technically having progression-ish card unlock, quote-unquote system, you are just unlocking things to randomly appear in the world, or not to appear. You can unlock a card and not see it for the next 2 runs. The game might as well just have all the cards unlocked at the start and not have any other kind of progression. Darkest Dungeon is a really good game, and it has a really good progression, which is pretty much the only reason people finish the game. But it is still so centered around fucking you over. It's not as fun to play as to either watch or stream, for me. Hades, though, felt to me like the first roguelike ever made, or I suppose the first one I've ever played, with the player experience in mind. You are actually in the center of the game, or the game recognizes you as the most important part of the game. You, and not the RNG calculator. What an awesome game. The only downside of it is the main character's voice, which is very pretentious and annoying, and just a tad too much VFX on the screen. Prepare yourself to be taking damage from things you physically couldn't quite see very often. And RNG builds can sometimes be underpowered, which will make for some runs to be slightly less fun than others, but they are still fun because you are collecting things for permanent upgrades and unlocks. And underpowered runs tend to make you play carefully, which often makes the run actually pretty successful. So don't take the game too seriously. Just go with the flow, enjoy it. By far the most impressive game of 2020, and I was very happy to play a little bit of it still. I originally played it on the Switch, on a friend's Switch, and now played a little bit on PC. That's why the footage is probably, the footage for this video is probably Hades, and that's why it's a new game. Game of the Year 2021 is probably Returnal, despite me never playing it. I think it's just super awesome idea. 2022 is Elden Ring, of course, or it could have been River City Girls too, but we don't talk about that game. Or maybe we will. I don't know. I played Diablo Immortal when it came out. I finished the story, nothing else to do, and that's where I stopped playing the game. I played as a necromancer. I think it's a very good game for mobile. For maybe about 20, 30-ish hours, possibly more. No idea what the microtransaction outrage was about. Why do you need them in that game, really? To keep beating, like, challenge rifts? Diablo 3 both plays better and has more endgame content, even though it has almost none. There's also Path of Exile and Torchlight and Grim Dawn and Lost Ark. Is there really nothing else to play other than the, like, Diablo Immortal's quote-unquote endgame? To the point where you have to throw thousands of dollars away trying to play it? I don't know. People can be too silly for my understanding. I don't understand. I mean, I understand the initial, like, announcement outrage, what that was all about, but the actual game, it's surprisingly solid for a mobile game. But any other Diablo-like is better, including Diablo 3. I probably won't be reviewing Diablo 4, by the way, because I doubt it will run on my hardware. But I kind of, like, passively looking forward to it. It looks like, you know, Path of Exile, essentially. It looks like a Diablo game for one. And you know what? Shit as it was, Diablo 3 is actually a pretty good Diablo-like. It really is. Especially after Immortal. If you play Immortal first and then 3, you'll think 3 is, like, awesome. I played a fair bit of RuneScape on mobile. I had fun for a little bit. I wish we had modern RPGs other than Albion, whatever, that worked similarly. Unfortunately, the most interesting part for me of Albion Online is locked behind a paywall, which is, like, farming, having your own kind of like homestead. So there's that. I played Satisfactory a while back, and I don't remember if I talked about it. It's really good. Exploration is by far the best part of the game, or maybe exploration, like, paired with the building mechanics. But once exploration goes away, the whole thing kind of falls apart for me. However, looking for specific resources you need and figuring out how to get them to your factory is awesome. And I really liked the world. It actually kind of, in a very strange way, it almost scratched like a Subnautica itch for me. Unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of how the factory building mechanics actually work in the game. The factories are just not very scalable, but the game's ever increasing demands keep forcing you to increase the production all the time. Eventually, regardless of how smart you start building your first factory, regardless of where you build it to, you will run out of space to adequately place all the crap you end up needing. And then you will eventually run out of space entirely. All that meaning that your factory will end up looking like crap and then eventually become literally impossible to expand. Meaning you will either have to build a completely new one someplace else or tear the old one down, possibly relocate it, and then spend literal days building a new, bigger one, just to possibly have to deal with the same problem later again. Now, I know that the game is quite literally about building factories, but to me, everything I just described is plainly not fun. It's the opposite, in fact. Plus, that game becoming not fun issue occurs pretty much exactly as you finish exploring the world. So not only the game forces you into ruining the factory you have built initially by making it a mess, just to tell you that actually it's completely no good for you and you have to tear it down, but also a huge part of the game is done at that point, really. Exploration. And to me, it just fired like a message in my brain. The game is over. At least the meaningful part of it, the fun part, the part with progression, or at least something that felt like one. And, with like finding new interesting things. And the solution to that is really the multiplayer, maybe. But that means finding friends who are in the same part of the game, who are just like you. They are not really enjoying it as much now. Just not true for everyone. If you just keep having fun with the game, there's nothing wrong with you. I wish I was enjoying it after a certain point. So you need to find somebody who's kind of like you, looking for new ways of having fun in Satisfactory, and now you need to somehow convince them to play in your world for like a week of like game time, building a new factory for you. No, if you and your friends are no lifers and you even you play in the same world all the time, this could work, of course. But if you are older than 25, you and your friends are probably already struggling to sync your schedules to play together even once a week for a couple of hours. So you probably have your own worlds to take care of. And it doesn't make too much sense keeping your factory on someone else's computer and not being able to access it like 90% of the time that you actually have to play a video game. It might just be a me problem. The game is really good, I think. It is still in early access, technically. There's just kind of no finality to it. It just keeps throwing more and more demands at you until your factory just becomes useless. And in my opinion, at that point, the game needs to introduce like new mechanics, allowing you to landscape and build on a large scale, RTS style, maybe, and not just manually do like one thing at a time, because that just becomes tedious and not fun for me. I will try to make more podcast style videos in the near future, maybe even a few reviews or rants, I don't know, about relatively recent stuff. I am very excited about the great reboot in video games we are currently witnessing, and some music and even language learning stuff actually makes me fairly excited too. I wouldn't necessarily mind sharing a few ideas and observations. This doesn't mean I am, like, quote unquote, back. After all, I'm sure you would rather have me working on my stuff and, like, not waste your and my time with this insane ranting and rambling. Or you just don't care about me in general, and this whole thing is just insanely cringy to you, which I feel the same too. But it's not a waste of time for me, because this is my therapy. This is my way to put my thoughts in order. I have a fair amount of those, and I go crazy when they are out of order for too long. In the perfect world, I would just upload once a week with, like, a progress update on whatever I'm working on. But because my projects don't make my life financially stable, I cannot just live through my craft. I have to go into the world and do various BS, which makes me stressed, which makes me want to do escapism things, which makes me want to talk about escapism things. It also makes me more stressed sometimes that I'm, doing sad things instead of working on the projects 24/7. But rest assured that I do them as much as I can. At this point, I had just sort of reached the limit on how long I can go without releasing something, or at least releasing an explanation for why there isn't something, without making a statement saying, yeah, I'm still here, I'm doing things, things like that. So yeah, the second Poison single is either out right now or it will be in about a week, maybe. And it is also possibly out on Bandcamp right now, or will be there in just about a day. I am working on a video game, which I will formally announce along with a demo, which will happen in maybe 2 months from now. And between now and then, I will probably make a few videos talking about random stuff just to keep myself from going thoroughly insane. Those videos will probably not be terribly good, and they won't be very short either. So I do apologize about that in advance.